And we're live.
Welcome to episode 5.
Oh, we're not doing half episode anymore. We're not
No,
counting the one as a half.
yes,
Alright,
we're now on episode 5, the
episode
official
five.
episode 5 of the Bow
Dude,
and Arrow
so
podcast.
after we get this introduction out of the way, you want to follow up on some of the tweets that we shared with each other this week regarding the last podcast, and then we can get
Yeah,
into
let's
today's topic.
let's start off with that. Let's get warmed up here.
Well, here, let's just warm up introduction wise. What did you do this week? How'd you be successful? Any failures? Any points of
Um,
interest?
let's see. I went to 5 hours of jiu-jitsu and I got tapped out a lot. So, I guess success is that I've been training, failure is that I've been tapping like no other, but I'm learning like I it's because out of the initial exchange I get my guard passed too easily. I need to be like way more assertive on that initial exchange, like
Mm-hmm.
whether it's standing or from the starting from the feet or starting from like the knees or sitting down or whatever. Like I always get beat at that first exchange, so I gotta like be on the offense for that first like 10 to 20 seconds more because I give up position way too fast. So
Yeah, that's my game in jiu-jitsu is a lot of like I would never try to pull guard. If I got put there, I'd try to get out of it as fast as possible on my back and try to work from the top. But there were also, like I said, probably in previous episodes, but at least in private, there was some killers in our gym that were just like, couldn't have weighed more than 110 pounds soaking wet, just like little Chinese kids that would strangle you in 3 seconds, no matter how big you were. So, and their
yeah,
game was always just like not even stand up, just straight pull guard.
and it makes sense. I mean, that's like the power of jujitsu is like it gives like smaller people a chance to just get your limbs entangled and just use their whole body against like the weakest joint of your body. So
Yeah. Yeah, this week, as far as my week was concerned, I had a wedding yesterday, and then my girlfriend came into town, for that as well. I haven't seen her in a while, so I was looking forward to that the whole work week. And then as far as like climbing goes, I took her to the climbing gym yesterday before the wedding, and they had one of the walls set up there for, they had a dyno competition, and for the uninitiated, a dyno is short for dynamic move, which is basically just jumping, like straight jumping, cutting feet, cutting hands from one hold to another. So they had these big, like kind of juggy holds set up as like start holds, and then some feet that you could just launch up off of. But some of the bigger or the larger dynos, like further up on the wall, were probably 6 feet in between like where the starting hold was and where the ending hold was. So you had to be like really explosive. And this wall was maybe 20 degrees towards you, 30 degrees. It was like slightly overhanging. So it was really fun. It's quite difficult, but I tore the shit out of my hands. Like I got two massive flappers on like right below the where the fingers like meet the palm on my
oh
left
yeah,
hand.
that's if I deadlift a lot, those like get all peeled up. Yeah, I know what you're
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about.
But I got blood all over like the starting hold, so I went up to the guy
Oops.
at the gym and I'm like, "Hey man, there's some blood on that starting hold." It was funny too because he was there like literally 2 minutes prior, like giving me advice on dynoing, and I was trying to follow his advice, wasn't like working out for me. And then he told me like one more thing. He's like, "All right, so basically, I'm like looking at you, and it looks like you're trying to do it, but what you want to do is when you're about to launch off, you want to get your feet literally as high as you can. Like if your feet are where your hands are, it's gonna feel like obnoxious when you're starting, but once you like swing yourself up and pull in and push off your feet, the position is just much better because your feet are higher and you can be more explosive. So I'm like, all right, I'll try it. I'll try it one more time. So I put my feet up super high, basically where my hands were starting on the wall, and then just gave it a big thrust up. And I didn't catch any of the holds, but I had launched myself up like 2 feet higher than I was previously doing. And
Yeah.
he like looked, he's like, holy shit, see, I told you. And I'm like, yeah, that worked. But then, like I said, 2 minutes later, I was just jumping around on the dynos trying to complete as many of them as I could before we left. And the last one I did, well, it had to be the last one because I was bleeding out of my hand, but I just tore the shit out of my palm. And I went back and got him and was like, hey, man, thanks for teaching me, but I went a little too hard. But that was good fun. So I've always, been more of like an explosive climber just from like my wrestling background. So having the dynos set up was like super fun to play around on versus some of the more technical stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the wedding was really cool too. I got to see my buddy Austin. I haven't seen him in a while. His sister was getting married, so the whole family was there. It was really nice. And
What kind of
then
cake did they have?
oh, I think my girlfriend said it was red velvet cake. I
Dude,
wasn't
you didn't
really
eat the
interested in
cake?
the
Oh
cake.
my
Fuck
gosh.
no. Dude, I barely ate the dinner. I was
Wow.
like I just didn't have much of an appetite. I had enough of an appetite to get down a few whiskey sours and some beer,
That
and
should have made you more hungry.
it didn't, dude. I mean, when I got there was okay, so I had that whole day, and even today, I think I'm coming down with something because, like I said, my appetite is just not there. But yesterday, we went to Jimmy John's after climbing, so I ate half my Jimmy John's sub, wasn't feeling it, had it in the fridge, and then like after the wedding, right before I went to bed, I got some appetite and finished the other half of it. But like when I was there, I really didn't have an appetite for anything besides
Huh.
just some drinks, which was kind of sucked, but it is what it is. The cake looked really cool. I didn't know like I don't know what I thought dissecting a wedding cake would look like or divvying it up to the guests, but it wasn't what had happened because they literally just kind of took a spatula and put it in between the two tiers, and then one of the other people in their gloves just like literally picked up the tier and plopped it onto a plate, and then they took that out back and
Yeah,
sliced it up, brought it back
there's
in.
no special way to do it. I mean, like unless you have like
I
a
get
$5,000 wedding cake or something.
Yeah, I guess in my mind, I envisioned them like slicing it piecewise. So like they would slice the top cake as a normal cake and then divvy that
Yeah,
up and then work their way down. But it just logically doesn't make sense. So it was kind of cool to see that happen too. And then the trippiest part, this will be the last bit on the wedding until we can get into the tweets that we saw. But the trippiest part was the open bar was kind of like in this arch because they had the reception in the same place as the ceremony, so it was kind of like a old church, and there was a projector that was like putting the wedding logo like in the backsplash of the bar. Now, there was a chandelier in this arch that was getting hit by the projector too. So the projector was in front of this chandelier, but I asked like six people that worked there. I asked a bunch of the guests. I was like, "Where the fuck is this projector at? I cannot find it." And we were trying to like narrow it down based on what we saw in the shadow. The bartenders weren't in front of, so like we were just looking and searching around like the roof of this huge domed monastery looking for this projector, literally couldn't find it, so that was the mystery of the night. But
that's
other than
yeah,
that, it
that's
was
weird.
great fun. And let me pull up the tweets I sent to you. They were just in this Discord from oh shit, do you have my handy by chance?
No, I don't
Because
think
I
so.
cannot find them. Well, that's unfortunate. At any rate, the two that I saw, one was I'll paraphrase both of them, but the first one was basically a guy said, whenever I get a good opportunity on my desk that may be a great opportunity for a friend, I pass it off, no strings attached, sort of thing. So it was just after kind of we were talking about the difference between transit or transactional react or relationships in networking versus like the friendship. And then you sent one my way too that was like basically juxtaposing the same thing, right?
Yeah, mine was at Sahil Bloom. I don't know who he is exactly, but somebody in my secret Twitter account retweeted him, and it says, "Networking is dead. You don't get anywhere in life by accumulating thousands of loose transactional connections. It's a transparent race to the bottom. You get somewhere by building genuine relationships, by helping people with no end in mind. Stop networking, start building." So
Yeah, that's a good one.
I think basically what he's saying is that like your air quotes networking shouldn't just you shouldn't just network just to network. You need to like actually try to build a relationship. I
Yeah,
think that's what that's saying basically.
I found the two tweets by the way. So these people, let me see if I know either of them. Doesn't look like it. So it looks like these guys are just kind of in the Twitter circle of like small business slash like entrepreneurship. and I know him through my buddy Alex, just like following him, so I see people liking stuff and stuff. But the first one is from at Joe Paulin on Twitter, and this was the one I just paraphrased. He said, "Had a good deal come across my desk that would be a great in all caps deal for a friend slash mentor. Called him up and passed it off. No fee, no strings, no BS." And then the second tweet was from at I'm Richard Ferting, again in kind of the same circle, and he said, "Build important strategic relationships long before you need them. You'll thank me later." So again, I think that I mean, obviously it was just kind of like confirmation bias from our recent podcast, but I think it's cool that we found three tweets that kind of echo the same sentiment in the book.
Yeah, there's Naval Ravikant. He has some stuff about that too. Like if you don't like working with somebody with 5 minutes, don't work with them at all, and blah blah blah. And
Hmm.
don't like don't underestimate the power of compounding relationships. Like the relationships you build now will become more and more, I guess, helpful the longer, like the earlier you start them. So
Yep.
yeah, just
And also
food for thought.
there's the aspect of like I mean I'm sure you're familiar with how LinkedIn works, where you have essentially you're able to consult a network 3 steps out from or 2 steps out from your network, right? You can see like three outwards, including your immediate connections.
So like
So
friend of a friend of a friend, right? Or
yeah,
is it
yeah.
just two? Okay, it's three.
I think it's 3 total iterations, with the first one being the people that you know intimately. So I think you see 2 beyond them, is my
Gotcha.
understanding. But at any rate, it when you look at that, when you start to like think about that, like say I know just two, or maybe like one doctor, like a medical doctor, really well. Well, surely, I mean, this guy's gone through med school. He's worked in the medical field. Surely he has 5 or 6 friends or colleagues that know different things about medicine. So if I asked him a question that he might not be able to answer to my satisfaction, well, now I have 5 or 6 guys that I can go to saying, "Hey, your friend, your colleague, so and so recommended me to you." So now they think that it's worth their time to do it. So, but we'll have a follow up podcast once we get around to completing the book. But I think that would be cool.
Yeah,
You want to
and
dive into our topic today?
yeah, so yeah, today I wanted to talk about Lord of the Rings. Yeah, that's about it. But just Lord of the Rings, that's I mean, people have done their entire dissertation about Lord of the Rings, and it's an ongoing fandom to this day with rabid fans and videos coming
Hmm.
out every single day and stuff. So it's not like it's a trivial topic to talk about.
So where do you want to start then? As we were talking before the podcast, I'm familiar with the Lord of the Rings universe. I've seen all of the movies, including the like most recent Hobbit movies, and I think I completed The Hobbit and at least tried my hands at 2 of the Rings books, but all of this was pretty long ago. Besides The Hobbit, and then recently I listened to a bit of the Silmarillion audiobook, so that's where I stand in terms of knowledge.
Yeah, so for me, I guess I read the Silmarillion twice. I've read through Lord of the Rings like 3 or 4 times, and then I've also read the Children of Húrin book, and then Beren and Luthien, and this book called Unfinished Tales, which is from J.R.R. Tolkien's notes. Um, I've also I dabble into the YouTube fans or the YouTube scene a little bit, like Men of the West and stuff like that. I've also seen the movies a few times, and I have not seen the second Hobbit movie. I saw the first and third one. I saw the third one in theaters, but I don't think I read the Hobbit book actually either, because it just didn't capture my attention as much as the other books. But I want to
Hmm.
talk about this because the new show is coming out in September by Amazon, and it's I don't know. The budget is $300 million. It's supposed to be their flagship fantasy show, and there's a lot of hype slash strife around it because um, people are scared they're gonna air quotes wokeify it
Yeah,
and
I think it's a definite possibility.
politicize it, or because everybody's been seeing the new Star Wars movies
Well,
and
that
some of
was
the
about to be
Marvel,
my
yeah, the new
question.
the new
So the
Marvel movies.
Mandalorian, the
Um,
Mandalorian specifically, did they do anything egregious with that? Because
no,
I heard a lot of people say that they liked it, I've never seen it, and I'm not like I know very very little about the Star Wars universe, but I don't know if they do anything egregious to that
No, because
franchise.
so basically what happened is after the Star Wars movies came out, the sequel trilogy, they were like, "Hey, we tried to make a product for everybody and ended up making a product for nobody." So for these new Star Wars movie or Star Wars content, we're gonna go back to we're not copying off Star Wars. We're gonna copy off like what inspired Star Wars, so like old westerns and old samurai movies, and they recaptured the vibe and made a really good show. Plus, The Mandalorian was made by or produced by Dave Filoni, who's like George Lucas's apprentice, basically. So they really turned the ship around with that show. So,
Okay,
but yeah, the
so
big
then
concern with Lord of the Rings is that they're gonna like totally mess up the spirit of the story, um,
and
stuff like that.
are these concerns based in any are there any like specific facts like oh this guy's producing it and we know he has a track record of doing this like are there any
So
concrete facts that people are
the
pointing
two
to?
guys that are producing it, they this is their first show they've written officially. They're like this will be the first show they have credits on. Like they've written for other shows, but they weren't credited. So I guess apparently as a writer, you have to get like a certain level of experience before you can just solo write or co-write a show and have your name on it. Apparently, so this is the
Hmm.
first show they've written, and the Tolkien estate basically they didn't give them the rights to the Silmarillion, but they did give them to the rights to the Lord of the Rings. And basically, this show is going to be from the appendix of the Lord of the Rings. So, but it's not going to be the Silmarillion, so it's going to be weird. I don't know. That's like the first thing people are concerned about, and then people are also concerned about like they want all the actors to be like European and white because it's supposed to be like an English mythology, and so far, like what's been released is that that's not going to be the case. And additionally,
So
for
let's
or let me finish.
okay.
Additionally, for Galadriel,
Write this down.
um, who's supposed to be this elf queen, basically, they made her into like a badass, like smart ass, like snarky heroine girl, and not like a beautiful, like gentle queen like she is in the books. And they're basically it's just like subverting like what Galadriel is supposed to be. Like those are the three main things that I've seen so
Okay.
far.
Let me. So I wrote them down just so I can remember them. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to not forget what your points were. So the first point was that this is going to be more of like a world building show, and that's basically what the Silmarillion was, right? So they think that it's like trying to do something that's already been done.
Yeah, basically it's like the Silmarillion without the Silmarillion, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
they might make new characters that do exactly what the Silmarillion characters do, but yeah.
Okay.
But
And
like
then the
specifically
second.
the appendix like of the book of Lord of the Rings.
Okay. So the second point was that the actors they're gonna pander to the woke crowd and basically bastardize the what the story's meant to be based on like where these actors are supposed to be from and like the fantasy
Yeah,
and what they're
that's
supposed to look like.
confirmed. Like the cast
Okay.
pictures they released, it's like a air quotes diverse cast.
Okay, and then point three was basically just tailing off point two, and it was a specific case of the Galadriel not being what she's supposed to be,
Yeah.
correct?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So I
I mean,
guess
there's
my
other complaints
response to
too, but
that
those are the three main things. But yeah,
when you say specifically the appendix of the Lord of the Rings, do you mean like the body part and you're using it figuratively or like the appendix of a book?
appendix of a book. Appendix of
Okay,
a book.
gotcha. Um, okay, so I guess my response to the first one, if they I don't know how people typically take because I know in like I've never watched anime, but I have a lot of friends that watch anime and they get really heated about when things are produced like content in that universe is produced that isn't quote unquote canon. Um so I would have a concern about if they're going to be making a world building series that essentially is the Silmarillion without the Silmarillion and they're going to be putting new characters, is that canon? And two, if it isn't canon, does that matter? So that'd be my first like question and concern. I don't see a problem with the specific plot line as long as it doesn't, like you say, subvert previous lore that's been established and make Tolkien look like he's it done something like fucked up previous in the storyline, but it's really just these guys that are producing the new age thing that needed to tweak some facts, some convenient little facts to make their shit work. The second, for the woke actors, I have always been against like getting like if an actor's ethnicity is like legitimately going to clash with how the story is being told and the effect it's going to have with the audience, I have a problem with that. If it doesn't matter, more or less, I mean, every we've talked before about how the author of a work includes everything for a specific reason, but that aside, if it quote unquote doesn't really matter what color or what ethnicity or what how an actor speaks, what kind of accent they have, then I'm all for getting, so like it doesn't matter who they are. If they're black, they're black. If they're white, they're white. But if, like you're saying, like, if they're trying to put a bunch of, Asians and blacks and all these people that just wouldn't be in the storyline otherwise, if it weren't for like kind of affirmative action esque like wokeness, I have a problem with that, and I probably wouldn't be consuming the media if it were as big of a problem as you're saying. I'm gonna actually. You said that they have pictures of the cast list for this.
Yeah, it just let me let me Google
Every
or let me
everyone's
send you the
everyone's white that I see so far. Rings of Power.
no, let me send you the article I was reading if it loads. It's
Okay.
from this Vanity Fair article. Basically, that's what started the whole like discussion because this is like the first look that we've actually had at um like basically anything about this show.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I
So
guess well, go ahead.
I was just about to say I don't know enough about your third point, that specific case of Galadriel, to say anything about that. But like I said about the first and second points, I have problems if they're basically fucking up the story for the sake of like
Yeah, I mean, like for
something that
me, I like to
shouldn't
do
matter.
for those type of things. I like to like play the opposite situation, and if it makes sense, then I'm okay with it. But like for Black Panther, you wouldn't have the Black Panther be like a Mexican dude, right?
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I was
That's what I'm saying. So like in the opposite
imagine the
situation, it
Black
doesn't make
Panther.
sense. Yeah.
Imagine the Black Panther, not even where it's like completely opposite, where everyone's white, but just imagine the Black Panther with like what the left imagines is like a slice of life. You have like a bunch of Hispanics, a bunch of Asians, maybe like two white people that aren't men because white men suck, and then black people. But then the whole story of that is that everyone there is supposed to be black because it's on the continent of Africa and it's Wakanda,
Yeah.
and that's
So
who
it
like
fails
it
my
doesn't
opposite
make
test.
sense.
Yeah, it fails my
Yeah, and that
opposite test.
was I didn't see that whole movie, but from what I saw, it was a pretty good movie. So
No, it was good. I really like that movie.
the fighting scenes were dope. That's the part that I remember.
Yeah, that and the soundtrack I think were all pretty awesome.
But you sounded like you had a point you were about to make before I reiterated myself, so I apologize. I'll let you go on.
Um, no, I don't think so.
I think it was something off the tail end of the Vanity Fair. You said from this Vanity Fair, this is what started the whole thing.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that's just like basically all of these YouTube videos and like fan discussions was started off of this Vanity Fair article, which came out uh February 10th, so 10 days ago, and that's like
Gotcha.
it's ignited. That's what's ignited the big discussion about like the cast and Galadriel and all this stuff.
Interesting, interesting. So who's I don't see Galadriel listed here.
She's the first chick in the picture, and I'll
Oh,
put
I
the
see
link.
Mo Morfid Clark.
Yeah, I'll post the link in the YouTube video so people can read the article. And then you see like the dwarf queen looks black, I guess, and then the sylvan elf Arandir looks ethnic. I don't know. He looks kind of mixed, but I mean that's what people are getting mad about. I don't know if I care or not at this point.
It depends. I mean, like so on paper,
Like if the
this is
story is still good, like I don't give a fuck. But
exactly,
if it's like
exactly.
messes up the story or like has any influence on the storytelling at all, then that's when I'm like, no, this is fucked. But
Yeah.
it
I
like
think I think that's the right opinion to have, but it also sucks because like opponents to that position are like since it's an opinion based thing and subjective as to whether the story's told well, there people are just gonna say like, oh well, you're racist.
yeah,
you,
I
you
know
don't
that's
you
it's
actually do like the story, but you're racist.
yeah. But yeah, like you see the first picture, Galadriel's in this big suit of armor, and then in the books, she's like this beautiful queen that has like divine power basically, and she doesn't need a fucking sword and like armor. She just like has magic power. and she represents like the feminine power, not like just trying to be a dude, I guess.
Hmm.
People are getting pretty pissed off about that actually.
Oh yeah, I do. She does look. That's like Brienne of Tarth-esque. Like
It's
that's some heavy
like heavy
armor. Yeah,
armor, sword,
yeah, yeah.
and then as like Galadriel in the movie is like in this beautiful dress with like a circlet made out of like platinum and
Yeah, no, there's very little like feminine or divine imagery on that armor too. There's a little like cross kind of crest right on the breastplate, but that's about it.
but yeah, and then the other one, the appendix of Lord of the Rings. I mean, it, it had like a bunch of family trees, a bunch of language stuff, and had like a few like little tidbits of like how the rings were made and like the wizards and stuff. So it's pretty loose, basically.
Yeah, I mean,
So I mean, essentially, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that they're going to be making up the vast majority of this story like from scratch.
and is that good or bad in your opinion? Because what I was thinking about this earlier, and it's like, if everyone loves the Lord of the Rings, and we can just agree on, the Lord of the Rings is like good in terms of like fantasy storytelling, and all of the content that you could possibly get out of what was written by Tolkien has been exhausted. At that point, do we, look for the next great fantasy, or do you keep iterating on what has worked? And I have two kind of positions on this. One comes from the Marvel universe, where they seem to pump out like a new, or like the same superhero movie every week. Um, I that rubs me the wrong way. That seems really weird, and I stopped watching Marvel movies as soon as they like became like production line kind of one a week sort of thing. But then as far as like Lord of the Rings goes, and some of the books that are made into movies, because some of the authors that wrote these things never envisioned their works getting put on the screen if they're even alive during the screen for some of these works. So like when you're adapting a work to modern era, I like that. I like being able to watch it on the screen. But if you're completely making up a story, based on this universe, what are the rules with that? Do we have to play by what's previously established? Are you allowed to pave your own, you know what I mean? Kind of get into more of the fan fiction realm. What's the appropriate kind of usage of Tolkien's content here, and what would you like to see?
Well, I guess from like a legal standpoint, if the Tolkien estate like sold the rights to this to Lord of the Rings, they can do whatever they want and it's air quotes canon. But like from a creative standpoint, in my opinion, like nothing other than what J.R.R. Tolkien or his son Christopher like explicitly wrote can be considered to be Lord of the Rings. And that includes like the games and even the movies, technically.
Hmm.
But it's funny because Christopher Tolkien, his son, basically after J.R.R. Tolkien died, he Christopher went through all of his notes, which there's like thousands and thousands of pages of notes, like line by line, like parsed it out and compiled it into like a publication and curated it. And he like jealously like protected the IP. And it basically like getting the rights to make a movie out of the books was like incredibly challenging apparently. But then after Christopher died, the rest of the estate was like, yeah, here Amazon, you can just do whatever you want with this. Is to my understanding.
Yeah. Okay, that makes
So like
sense. Then
I don't think it's fan fiction, but I don't think it's canon either. I think it's like Star Wars like expanded universe basically. Like it's a story set in that universe, but it's not in like the main story in my mind at least.
yeah.
Because
Well, then
for
I
me,
guess
fan fiction isn't like there's no money involved in fan fiction and no like extensive like effort to distribute the story and publish it and stuff like that. Fan fiction is just like on some website and you just like write it for fun. So I think it's a step above fan fiction, but it's not quite canon.
okay. That makes sense. I can conceptualize that. What my opinion then would be on this is that if we're to envision this work as what you just said, kind of treading the, it's technically canon because the rights have been sold, but we can all agree as Lord of the Rings fans that it's not canon. Even if it was a good story, It it wasn't written by a Tolkien. So my opinion then is if it's a good story, I will be more than happy to watch it and get enjoyment out of it. And I don't care who the actors are, what they look like, or whatever, as long as the story is able to be told well. And that also comes with it. It has to be a good story told well. It could be a shitty story told well, and I'm not going to have interest. But it has to be a good
Right.
story, so there has to be good writing, good decision making behind it, and then put that together on the screen. But my question now is how long do you see, assuming this series is like moderately successful or whatever the projected success is supposed to be, how long do you see this being? Do you think it's going to be like, 5, 6 seasons and that's it? Or is it going to be something that they just try to keep milking and milking and milking? And if that were the case, do you think it'd fall apart at some point? Or, is the Lord of the Rings universe big enough that you can just kind of like, you know, go on with generations and generations of hobbits and elves and this and that and the other and make convincing, interesting, and stories.
Well, to my understanding, they're gearing up for at least 5 seasons, at least.
Gotcha.
I don't think the money is a huge deal right now because Jeff Bezos himself is like personally backing this because he's a huge Loader fan. So I think yeah, it could go at least 5 seasons, and hopefully it's good. And also to your point of like, will you keep making Lord of the Rings stuff forever? Yes, because it keeps making money and people still love it. It's a timeless story, so people always want to read more stuff about it or play more games of it. And like the Lord of the Rings Shadow of Mordor game, that game was so fun.
Yeah, I heard
Like
really good things about
it
that.
was
That
so
was
fun.
years ago, though.
Yeah,
That
I
was
never
that was when I
played.
was in high school, I believe.
Yeah, that was 2014, and then the sequel Shadow of War. I never played it, but it looked fun too. But like that game was ridiculously fun. It definitely wasn't canon or anything, but like the dude has like an elf like possessing him kind of, and he like you can kill orcs in like super gratuitous fashion and like upgrade your sword with magic. It's no, that game was
Yeah.
awesome. Like if it's like that, like I understand like it's not J.R.R. Tolkien's vision or whatever, but it's still like you can like
So
role play like yourself in that universe basically.
yeah, I think what my what's the is it? I don't know if I want to say litmus test or Turing test here. I think
Probably
my
litmus
my
test.
my shit test here, what's called a shit test, is so basically what's always infatuated me with especially Tolkien's work and C.S. Lewis's work is the how deep it is and how like rooted in subjects like theology, um, history that might have been modern at the time, but now not modern. And just these deeper subjects that you can look beyond and write legitimate like um, literary essays on these novels, or maybe less so the movies, but just the story as a whole. And if I don't get that same sense of like being able to think deeper and further about the content that Amazon's going to put out, I think that's going to be the big thing for me that kind of turns me away from it. Because it's one thing to just sit down and view like a fantasy experience, and that's all fine and dandy. I love fantasy, but having that deeper meaning and like the behind the story, I think is really important, and it's like super prevalent in Tolkien's work, and again like C.S. Lewis as well. And that's one of the things that's always caught me.
Yeah, well, I was reading about that also, and basically, C.S. Lewis, like, if you read the Narnia books or whatever, it's like an allegory almost directly of like Christian themes. Like,
Yeah,
Aslan is like directly Jesus, and so and like the Wicked Witch or the Ice Queen or whatever is like directly Satan and blah blah blah. And with Tolkien, he's like specifically was like, I don't like to use allegory. So basically, there's no one for one like direct correspondence to Christianity in Lord of the Rings itself, but apparently he was like a deeply devout Catholic, and like there's a lot of themes, like religious themes in his book, um like Frodo isn't your typical like badass hero. He's like a little hobbit who has like no power, and he's like it's like the Christian, like the meek will inherit the kingdom of heaven or whatever. It's and also like there's themes of forgiveness. They forgive Gollum, and then also like if you include the Silmarillion, there's like the notion of God and angels and demons, and so yeah, it's even though none of it's like a direct correspondence to like Christian mythology in Lord of the Rings, there's a lot of thematic elements that are extremely similar, I think.
Yeah.
Whereas
See, I
like
mean,
in Narnia specifically, it's like C.S. Lewis like was like, all right, I'm using this. This directly corresponds to this, and
yeah. Well, I mean that's the nature of an allegory.
yeah, and
Not so.
like they were in like to give more background, like C.S. Lewis and Tolkien were like really good friends, and they were in this club called the Inklings, where they would like go to this bar and like smoke cigars and like talk about writing and stuff like
Mhm.
every week. So
I don't know about that. I do know though that C.S. Lewis, beyond the Narnia allegory, has written a lot of like Christian books, and he even wrote a preface to Milton's Paradise Lost. So he's like deeply embedded in theology, very well studied man. So even beyond just the Narnia work, he has a lot of writings on the subject.
oh yeah, but also
But
to your point of like a deeper universe. So basically, Lord of the Rings, Tolkien like wrote these like languages, these like fake languages first, basically without any story. And he's like, well, I'm gonna make a story for this now. So it's and then he made the story not as like a direct narrative, but it's he wrote it as like a historical like recording of what was happening. So that's what you were saying about like there's layers to the story, and it's like
yeah,
it's part of a larger environment. Whereas like um in the Narnia books, it's just a story. It's not like part of some crazy history or anything. So
yeah, and I wasn't trying to make the claim that Lord of the Rings was a direct allegory. Simply
yeah, I'm just
the
clarifying. Or but like it
yeah,
does. It's not like I'm what I'm getting at is like Narnia is Lord of the Rings isn't, but they both like have ties to that Christian like themes, whether
yeah. What
directly or not.
what I was trying to convey was simply just like the difference between. It's like right now I'm watching Peaky Blinders with my girlfriend. Very good show. I love the show, but it would be a bit more difficult for me to write a like literary analysis on that show, or a media analysis, I guess it would be called, on that show, versus something like Lord of the Rings, where there's so much substance and meaning there that it still is hard, but the difficulty instead becomes, well, what do I write about since there's so much to write about? Like, what do I pick to write about?
Yeah,
Versus like something like Peaky Blinders, where you probably have to stretch a little bit further to find like deep meaning, and it'd probably come off as a little bit more like cringy and superficial, and grasping
like
at
a
straws that might
fandom
not be there.
Wikipedia. Yeah,
But Lord of the Rings, it's like very very solid roots in the things that you're actually like looking to analyze in most like literary analysis, which is
yeah,
typically like, how does this work have hold its meaning in like the real life, like, well, what's it telling us?
yeah.
So
And it's like part of that is because like he wrote the story like over the course of like 20 years, like every single
mhm.
day, like and like I mentioned earlier about the unpublished notes, he literally like had 20,000 pages of like notes for this story, and then the story is like I don't know, like what, like 1,000 pages long. So it's and he's rewritten and redeveloped parts of the myth over and over again. Too, it's kind of like Dune, uh, which Dune is basically the science fiction equivalent of Lord of the Rings. Frank Herbert rewrote Dune like 5 or 6 times over the course of like 10 years, and that's why the story has so many different layers to it. It's not just like purely an adventure, like a pulp fiction adventure. It's like a almost like a commentary on events that happened in a fictional universe, basically.
Yeah. I forget where I saw the article, but and I wanted to bring this up previously, but I also bring it up now. There is a camp of people that do not believe that Lord of the Rings was at all inspired by religion, and they are trying to espouse that it is not. And I tried to Google and find the article, but I don't know
No, I
exactly.
actually I have those articles up in my other tab right now because I was reading about it, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we can get into this, but like I was honestly like pissed off reading this article because this dude was like, well, specifically the article, which one was it called? Um,
I think the one that I read was this article on medium.com, like
yeah, that's
small,
I'm
medium,
looking at that
large.
one.
Yeah, I
Um,
think this is the one I saw. I think it was on
it's
Reddit
oh,
at
it's
some
called
point.
No Tolkien's Lord of the
Yes.
Rings isn't Christian. Yeah, I read that
Yep.
this morning. But like, the thing is about this article, like, he almost like contradicts himself in the article, basically, because he says like, yeah, it's not Christian, but then he says except in this one letter where J.R.R. Tolkien says it's a Christian story. He only says it in one letter. I'm like, bro, he literally Tolkien literally said it's a
Drunk, dude.
Christian
He was
story.
drunk. He was off the liquor.
He only said it one time, but like, well, how many more times does he have to say it for it to be true?
And
Oh
we didn't
man.
know exactly what he meant by The Lord of the Rings is inspired by the Christian religion. We didn't know exactly what that meant. And we thought he was drunk, so.
And I was like reading the comments of this article too because I was curious. And there's comments are actually like super like well thought out for like the top like 10 comments. And they gave like specific examples like I did about like there's a god and there's like Satan and this the themes, religious themes. And he's like, well, you didn't list any specific themes about why Lord of the Rings is a Christian story. And like, bro, he literally just spent like 3 paragraphs doing that. Like, um,
What the? Alright, so
and
this
then
part,
here,
I'm
let me.
reading through the
Okay,
article right now,
okay.
and it says there is no racism, misogyny, homophobia, compulsory heterosexuality, or theocracy, all standard in Christian stories. So it's very
I mean,
obvious
that's
that,
like a baseless accusation,
yeah,
basically.
right off the bat, this guy has no understanding of what Christian stories actually are.
And like,
And then
even if okay,
he makes the assertion that Tolkien's vision is deeply queer. Ah, 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 ah.
yeah. Well, I read that article too, or like the article he linked to that, and basically it's saying that Frodo and Sam were gay. But
Dude, they
then I
were
did,
boys.
but then I did more research into it, and they're like, I guess you could interpret that as being like their relationship, but given the context of like J.R.R. Tolkien's life and like his experience in war and how he wrote the story, like you can also make a pit like for me it's like a more convincing argument that they weren't gay,
Yeah,
but like
but
you can interpret it that way. I'm not saying you can't, but I think the more likely scenario is that you just take their Frodo and Sam's relationship at like face value as how Tolkien presents it. But I mean,
yeah,
yeah, that's
I
what he was
think
going to in that queer statement.
the Occam's razor here simply due to the fact that this guy, if we're to believe that the Bible compels you to be heterosexual, which I mean, look, really what the Bible says is that you can be gay if you want, but it's a sin. So whether that's compulsory or not, whatever. But assuming that the Bible does compel you to be heterosexual, there are verses in the Bible where there are grown ass men telling you, "I love you," like face to face, as brothers, or as Jesus was saying to Peter, and vice versa. Like in today's day and era, if you saw two guys at a bar that were just like, overjoyed maybe to see each other after like a really long time, best friends or something, and then before he leaves, I love you, man. Like you're my brother. I love you. But he didn't say like the brother part, just said I love you, and that was enough meaning. Because again, in the Greek language, there's more than one word for
Yeah, I
love.
was
So
about to
like,
say that. Yeah, there's
yeah.
like 8 different
So
kinds of love in
so
there.
phileo, I believe, would be used to express
Yeah,
brotherly love,
philia
and
or
then agape is
agape. Yeah,
godly love. That's divine love. So like the scene between Peter and Jesus was like basically it was like phileo, agape phileo or something like that. So the significance was in the mismatch there. But again, in today's day and era, since English only has one word for love, if you told someone that you loved them and it's a guy telling a guy, probably less so with a girl telling a girl because it's more socially accepted for girls to be like closer and more intimate. But if it's a guy telling a guy, the first thought that you're gonna have in like modern era is probably like, oh, those are two gay guys, and that's okay because it's so normal nowadays that that's just immediately how you interpret it. But back in the day, through the lens of like a biblical lens or perhaps even Tolkien's lens, I think the Occam's razor of the scenario is much closer aligned
yeah,
with like
I agree.
their boys, and yeah, they probably do love each other. Like it's very obvious that one or the other would take a crossbow bolt or a sword for his friend, his brother. And I think that the love there is not like, I want to have sex with you sort of thing. I think it's
Yeah,
a little different.
and also like what I was talking about, J.R.R. Tolkien fought in World War I, and like if you see like your friend gets shot and he's like dying in your arms, like you are gonna hold his hand and like kiss him and like
Yeah,
correct,
but
because the dude
also
is like, I mean, it's like it strips bare all of the like societal what norms you have, because in that moment you're just like two people just trying to comfort
and
each
what you
other
also got to
and
remember about
express
World War
love. So
One. About World War One, I was recently reminded of this watching the Peaky Blinders. Is that was the most brutal war I think ever fought, just due to the mismatch in technology between war tactics and what people had available to kill each other with. Like you were witnessing like slaughter instead of just like modern warfare where you're in Afghanistan and maybe an IED goes off and like yeah that's still tragic. But I think the soldiers in World War One were built a little fucking different, dude.
yeah, I mean, yeah, we can get into that more, but basically, like, yeah, like we said, there's a more compelling argument that Frodo and Sam are just friends than they're gay. Although, like I said earlier, you could still interpret it that way, but it's you have to stretch a little bit. But yeah, going back to the Tolkien isn't Christian article. Let's see here.
Yeah, so I don't know enough about like this subject again to specifically debunk every single one of these
Yeah, I
authors'
mean,
claims.
I don't want to go into that deeply, but where
But
do
some of the
I?
things he says, like he says right here that Tolkien clearly did not believe in the traditional heaven and hell. He could easily be read as not Catholic at all. He was clearly not devout,
See, that's
which
just like a totally
seems to
baseless accusation
clash.
because he went to
Yeah.
church like every single day.
But it's also it could be I don't know. I could ask Anna because she's Catholic, but heaven and hell in Catholicism, I believe, is a little different because I think there's like a purgatory, right? You get
Yeah,
sent
there
to
is.
purgatory or something. So yeah, I guess you could say a sentence about somebody who's Catholic because they believe in purgatory and not quote unquote traditional heaven and hell. That he clearly did not believe in traditional heaven and hell. So that sentence could be true. But from what everything you've told me and from everything I've garnered from this man, he seemed like a pretty devout Catholic.
Yeah, and I
But
guess like to wrap up this part of the discussion, like for me, I'm going back to that letter that he sent. So here's what this guy says in the article. He says a single letter seemed to clarify Tolkien was a Christian writer. In 1981, the letters of J.R.R. Tolkien reprinted a 1953 personal letter that Tolkien had written to Father Robert Murray, a Catholic priest, who said that Galadriel, the elf queen, resembled the Virgin Mary. Tolkien seemed to agree and added, "The Lord of the Rings is, of course, a fundamentally religious and Catholic work. Unconsciously so at first, but consciously in the revision." For me, that statement alone is enough to like debunk the entire article because it came from Tolkien's mouth or hand, I guess, directly. So,
yeah, so there is another thing that I just found on this guy's profile.
I mean,
I
like
don't.
for reference, that dude, like every article he writes is like anti-Christian,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, yeah.
So
But
he's kind
he
of like
also
following a narrative of
yeah
he's
that
creating.
that's one of the discoveries I made. The other one is that he did post on January 18th saying that he was going to set out to research and reread the Bible and like he said thanks to the commentators that helped him think through the tricky issues again being described in the but it doesn't seem like that he's stepping away from like I think it's what you said. I think that maybe he believes this, maybe he doesn't, but it's more like this is the narrative that he has to put out to get clicks and views and stuff.
Yeah, which
But yeah.
yeah, I mean, just like for me, like literally that letter alone, like totally like makes null every other argument.
Yeah, I mean, you said it fucking loud and clear, dude.
I mean, I don't know how more unambiguous you can get than that. So
But it's like, I just couldn't imagine if I like imagine Tolkien's up in heaven right now, just or in purgatory or wherever Tolkien's at, just looking down or up or sideways at us and seeing like his letter written in his own handwriting that some dumbass reads and goes, "No, I don't think he actually meant that."
yeah,
Imagine how frustrating.
clearly the dude is like smart and has done his research, but he just wants to die on his hill without making like the full argument. He wants to like make like a singular dimensional argument, I guess. So, but I don't know what Tolkien would think honestly, because he was if you, I've listened to some interviews of him on YouTube. He was like so different from everybody else. He was so smart and like when he talks, he talks like so fast. It's like the words are like racing to get out of his mouth like as fast as he can think about it. It's really he was really a genius. So beyond he was like a one in a billion creative mind in my opinion.
Yeah, I actually have rekindled motivation to get through the Silmarillion and dive further into some of those interviews because that sounds like something that'd be right up my alley.
Yeah,
Uh,
honestly, I'll send you the link to one of his interviews after, but just like watch YouTube videos about the Silmarillion and like skip the Fellowship and just read the Two Towers and Return of the King and go back cuz Fellowship is kind of more like I get how it's supposed to be like setting up the story and everything, but like for the average reader, like they don't want to power through Fellowship. But if you start out with Two Towers and then read Return of the King and go back, I think that's like my recommended reading order to people because most people that read Lord of the Rings like have seen the movies already, so it's not like they're getting spoiled or anything. So yeah, that would be my recommendation to you is just like watch some YouTube videos about the Silmarillion and then like start reading the Two Towers.
yeah, what I think I might do, I might just take that recommendation. I'm not sure. I am gonna look into because I'm assuming it is chronological, right? Like, reading the Two Towers and then what is it? Two Towers, Return of the King,
Yeah,
and then what's the third one? Or was that the
that is
second
the
and third
third. That
one?
is the third one. Yeah,
What's the first one?
Fellowship of the Ring.
Fellowship. Okay, so reading Fellowship, then Two Towers, then Return of the King. You're reading it in chronological order, correct?
Yeah, but in my suggested order, if you've seen the movies, you need to read two, three, one. Unless you're like a really disciplined reader that can
Well,
like
what I was
slog through
saying is
and
that
boring
what I
stuff.
might do is slot like an hour each day to sit down and read in front of the computer, where I'm able to consult the wiki and have visual maps up, to kind of see what's going down, and then do it that way. And I think that would be like a better way for how I work.
Gotcha. Well, I'm just saying because like in Fellowship, it starts out with they're at the party, and then they go to the hotel, and then they travel, and then
Oh,
like
I see. I remember that
blah blah
part. So
blah, and it's like it's
I've read Fellowship because they meet
okay,
up with the hunter there and then go to like the Barrows or whatever, right?
yeah,
And then they meet Tom Bombadil.
yeah, and then it's
Dude,
like
I
okay, well now we
fucking
got to
love
go to
Tom Bombadil.
Elrond's forest, and now we got to do this, and then like
Yeah.
it just like
No, I read through that whole book. Yeah,
okay,
it's
cool.
coming back to me. It's
So
coming back to me. I don't remember specific details, but they hung out with the elves and the trees, and then they went to
yeah,
that fucking cave, and then there was like a beast there. Yeah,
yeah, so yeah, yeah, like if you're gonna
yeah.
read
I'm
it,
gonna
I would
reread this.
start out with two or yeah. I mean, obviously do whatever you want, but my
I think
reading order
I'm gonna
still
try to
stands.
take the disciplined approach and do one, two, three with the aids on my computer. And if I find myself stumbling on the promises that I make to myself when reading that first book, I'm just gonna put it down and skip to two. I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. And plus, like you've seen the movie, so it's not like yeah. Um, yeah. There's just one little other part of that article I wanted to touch on really quick.
Yeah, let's do it.
Um, so basically, at the end of this dude's article, he says, "Does the Silmarillion save the day?" At a loss to find Christianity in The Lord of the Rings, Christians like to cite a late collection of mythic scripts that Tolkien wrote and never published. They conveniently forget points like many of his gods are female. So this paragraph, I think this dude totally misses the mark here too, because in the Silmarillion, um, like there's one main spirit, Iluvatar, who's basically God, and then there's like
Hmm.
minor angels and spirits that are like female and male or whatever. So
Yeah, the
the
what was it called?
Valar,
The Einhar, right?
yeah, I think together they're called the Ainur, but like specifically the lesser angels are like the Valar and then the Maiar. But anyway, um, they conveniently forget points like many of his gods are female, but also the fact that or excuse me, that's not the point I wanted to make. A collection of mythic scripts that Tolkien wrote and never published. That doesn't invalidate it for me because in the Two Towers and the Return of the King, Tolkien specifically references the Silmarils, I'm pretty sure, and then he also references Telperion and Laurelin, which were like the two trees that like predated the Sun and Moon in the Two Towers and Return of the King, and that those two things are directly in the Silmarillion and are never mentioned anywhere else. So the fact that it just wasn't published at that time, like that doesn't really mean much in that dude's argument, in my opinion.
Wait, so his argument is that the Silmarillion actually doesn't matter and isn't part of the,
Yes,
like,
basically, which is
oh
completely
wow.
not true.
Yeah, that one's a little further out there, I think. Because what I was gonna say earlier is like, I wonder if it would be cool to like have this guy on the podcast and like ask him what he thinks. But I was thinking about asking you that. And I'm like, oh no, it probably wouldn't be cool because my assumption is what happens is that when you're talking about like issues in life, like everything has more than one answer. Everything's pretty complicated, which is why Occam's razor is a thing, right? Like the simplest solution is often like the one you should go for,
Or like the
the one you
most
should
likely, yeah.
yeah, the one you should devote your time towards like pursuing because that's likely the truth and how you should operate according to the truth in life because if you I mean the very simple example is if you have like a 9 o'clock appointment and you tell yourself it's an 11 o'clock appointment, you're gonna fucking miss the appointment. So very simple, easy example there. But when you start to look at things, this guy goes, "Oh, well, Tolkien's works were definitely queer. Like they can definitely be interpreted as queer." It's like, sure, like yeah, you can interpret it. You could think that Sam and Frodo are like lovers, but the simpler solution is that they're not. And even if this man were able to come on our podcast and concede that the simplest solution is that they're not lovers, he's still going to say, "Well, but they could be," and that's what I want to think about. So there's no I don't think there's much ground to be gained there. I think our basic assumption that this guy has an agenda and he's sticking to it is sort of
Yeah, I mean, like he makes some interesting points, but like overall, like I can like almost point for point like debunk most of his statements.
yeah.
And like
I
this isn't like a rigorous like work like article either. It's just kind of like a blog post that just kind of
mhm.
has like bullet points for like each thing where really each of these singular paragraphs he has could like be a separate blog post.
Yeah, and it's also I think it's a lot easier. Well, so there's always there's that age old adage. I don't know exactly how it goes, but it's something along the lines of like it's really easy to identify a problem and harder to fix one. I think it's easy to think of thought provoking points and way harder to like discuss those or have the knowledge to discuss those.
Yeah, and also
So
we don't know if this dude actually read those books or not.
exactly.
Like
Yeah,
I
what I was just about to
really
say,
I
he could have
really
just
don't know.
Googled.
Like I
He
I don't know. Based on reading
this
this article, I could say that he hasn't read these books, but yeah. So
This could I would assert that he probably at least hasn't read the Silmarillion if because he's like this
yeah,
unpublished ancient text that was discovered. But what I was gonna say is I think that this also could be, and I don't know if there's evidence to support this, but this guy could have very well spent a little bit of his day googling and kind of amassing the most left leaning controversial points criticizing Tolkien's work and then made a blog post and offered very little commentary. So this could not even be like points that this guy is thinking of, just points
yeah.
that he's collected. So there's that to be thought of as well.
And
But
like yeah,
I think
I like hate to like like completely disagree with somebody, but I think for the most part I can kind of see what he's getting at here, but I have to say I completely like disagree with this blog article. So, and then
yeah,
yeah, again there was videos about this too. Like some of the people I watch on YouTube like talked about this article and stuff like that. So,
yeah. I think I saw this one on Reddit, and I believe this is the exact one. I haven't had a chance to read through it yet, but I've been glancing at it as we've been talking, and I'm kind of on the same page as you. I seem to disagree with every single one of his points, which again I don't really like doing because it makes it seem like I'm being lazy in my analysis. But from what I can see, it looks like I draw contention with every single one of these. And then also, I'm on the same page insofar as I don't believe that he's actually read the novels, or if he has, it's like me years ago and remembers very little details that need a bit of mixing up by a friend that actually knows what he's talking about to come to the surface. So the dude's bio is religion, sex, facts. So I think we're pretty spot on the money with our analysis here.
but yeah, that's just like it's just interesting to hear like both sides of this dialogue because on like my side like is like this Lord of the Rings story or your show is gonna suck, and then there's the other side that says no, it's gonna be good, blah blah blah. So we'll
So
we'll have to
what
see
I
when it
would
comes
be
out.
interested to see, Aaron, I would think this would be hilarious. Okay, so imagine a reality where this could actually happen, but imagine the show completely goes woke, like left leaning, against the story, just like panders to the woke audience, and then this guy comes back and makes an analysis of the fucking show and says 10 out of 10. I love it.
That would be hilarious. But dude, I'm telling you, if the show is like that, it's gonna be universally hated. It's gonna be off like there's gonna be extreme backlash on that show. I guarantee it because like before the new Star Wars movies came out, everybody was always excited. But now, after those movies happened and whatever, now people are always super apprehensive about new IP getting made out of existing franchises like this show. So we'll have to see. It's actually funny because for the Wheel of Time show, based on those books, I really liked the show. Like I thought it was cool, but it definitely had like woke stuff in it and like a like diverse cast or whatever. Like, but I didn't think that detracted from the story at all. And they also like made these two characters who were friends like they made them into like lesbians and like honestly I didn't even care about that either because like when I read the story I was like okay I mean this could have easily happened but like from what I've been reading on the internet like a lot of people really hated the show for those reasons so
What show is that? I've never seen that. What was that an adaptation of, like the original work?
it's called The Wheel of Time. It's on Amazon Prime. It's an
What?
adaptation of the Wheel of Time books.
Oh, so I've never even heard of the Wheel of Time books then.
Yeah. Well, we talked about it in episode 1 briefly. It's by Robert Jordan, that one.
Mm.
But anyway, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, we'll just have to see. Cuz obviously like they're putting a huge budget into it and if Jeff Bezos is like behind this and he's a huge fan of LOTR, that kind of makes me a little bit hopeful that they're not going to completely fuck it up. But
Yeah, I'm on your side here. I think if Jeff Bezos like went to fucking Reddit or 4chan or wherever the nerds hang out and like just completely let them make the decisions about how the story was told, like all the really devout fans, maybe like the wiki devs and shit, it's gonna be really good. But if he takes Mr. Paletti's advice here and does what he wants, I think again it's not going to be good. I hope they understand their audience because Lord of the Rings genuinely does feel like one of those things that's like held in high regard by the people that just don't care about the whole identity politics thing. So if they can pull that off and pander to the woke audience simply by who they choose in the cast without affecting how the story is told, again, I think it'll be a good watch for everyone for maybe for different reasons. Maybe some people are watching it because their favorite black actors in it, whereas they need to preserve that genuine like I want to watch it because it's my favorite fantasy series and I like the fantasy aspect of it and the storytelling and the deepness and how you can go to bed thinking about layers and layers and layers of the story that you just watched. So
yeah, I think. Well, actually, I think there's like no like big actors in these shows because from what my understanding, like for these fantasy shows, they take like no name actors and don't pay them, and then they become like that's what happened with Game of Thrones. Like nobody knew about most of these actors, I think, and then they all became like superstars.
yeah.
But yeah, September 22nd this year is when episode 1
Ooh.
comes out, or excuse me, September 2nd. So
And are you able to watch this if you have Amazon Prime, or do you have to have like an additional service?
nope, it's just straight up on Amazon Prime, so you should
Oh,
be
that's
good if
sweet.
you have that.
Yep. All
Any
right.
closing remarks beyond what we made?
Well, I was just about to ask. So we covered basically the TLDR things. We covered our thoughts on the franchise, and then kind of worked into what we thought about the show, and then broke down this specific article, kind of encapsulating what I think is a pretty broadly held view, but I could be completely wrong there. It could just be like this guy that's making this and a very niche community thinking that there's no religion behind it. Because again, I think it seems like a silly argument. And beyond that, I can't think of anything else. Like I said, I'm the mental midget in this conversation here, so I'm relying on your lead for topics. If you want to close things out, we can.
Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered everything. So
So yeah, I'm hopeful for the show. I'm hopeful for it.
same. I like if they do it right, it could be. like it really could be the next Game of Thrones. It could be like a cultural phenomenon if they do it the right way.
Yeah.
So we'll
Dude,
see.
Game of Thrones was a great example of a fantasy that is able to have diverse actors. If we want to talk about one more thing here.
Yeah,
Cuz
yeah. I
dude,
mean, because
there
it's
were
like
so many different regions. There was
yeah,
like a desert region where you would expect, and if any of this is construed as racist, I have no racist intentions behind this, so I'm just going to continue saying what I'm saying. You would expect to find people of like Arabic or darker skin, Middle Eastern people in like a desert region, right? That makes
yeah,
sense.
and they had the northern
Um,
region with like everybody's
yeah,
pale and
everyone's
whatever.
pale and white, and the European kind of esque picture there. And then you have a whole community of these people that are quote unquote white, but like they're savages, they're living in tents and stuff. And I'm sure they could be construed as a different race by localities. There's people in Africa that I wouldn't be able to tell apart as different races, but amongst them it's clearly obvious who's in which camp. And then they have very large amounts of African Americans, or America doesn't exist there, so black people in the film, and it is by far my favorite show that I've ever seen. And I might my opinion of the show might go down once I finish the books because I heard the storytelling in the last season wasn't very good, wasn't canon at least, and
Well, we
I
don't know
haven't.
because the end of the story hasn't been written yet.
Oh yeah, that's right, that's right. But
There's still two
people were
books left.
unhappy. People were unhappy with how who are the fucking producers? Dan and
Benioff and
something.
Weiss.
Hmm.
I think it's Dave and Dave. I'm pretty sure they're both Dave. Dave Benioff and Dave Weiss. I'm pretty sure.
It was Dan, but anyway,
Or Dan,
people were
whatever.
unhappy without that. I had zero problems with it. I fucking loved the show, and there were lots of people of color. I don't know if there was any like lesbian, gay stuff. Oh no,
Yeah,
there's
there's
that
a
gay
lot,
prince.
and there's in
Yeah,
the book. It's like that too. Like
yeah, and that all seems to fit because everyone there's like promiscuous and drinking, and yeah, that was a very. I think all the scenery and how the story was told there was well done, and I hope that the left thinks that's a success because there was a lot of gay sex and a lot of
straight
what's the word
sex
I'm looking
too.
for? Hedonism, a lot of hedonism, which again those people seem to like that stuff, and I liked the show. It was
Well,
great.
yeah, I mean, like when George R. R. Martin was writing those books, he like partially based it off War of the Roses in Europe, and then he also tried to make it like as realistic as possible, so it has like the full extent of human good and evil in it. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I mean, really, my only complaint about the show is that they rushed the end. Like the last season should have been like 3 seasons, I think, but that's why the writing was so shitty because they tried to take too many shortcuts and ended up being bad. But
Yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, I don't understand the arbitrary requirements for like every film to have to like portray everybody from
yeah,
every
I
sect of
understand where it's
life. And
coming from, but it doesn't make sense if you like think about it for more than like 32 seconds. So, but it's the climate right now, so you gotta navigate it, I suppose.
yeah. Oh, all right. I guess we can close out now. You're really good at closing out. What's the thought of the day, Aaron?
Okay, let me think here. Uh, I really just hope I don't get tapped out 45 times this week. Maybe lower that number to like 40. That's my
Are
close.
you noticing improvements in your no-gi game? You said you were getting like brutalized in the first few
I'm getting
classes.
brutalized in every class. Well, I haven't been going to Nogi the past couple weeks because my ankle has been kind of busted up, and we do a lot of
Oh,
wrestling in
yeah,
that
heel
one.
hooks.
Yeah, and that
You say you get
heel
heel
hooks
hooked a lot.
too. So yeah, I'm letting my ankle like heal up all the way before I go back to no gi. But I've been doing gi. It's just like the step up from the advanced classes or the beginner class to the advanced class is like insane. it's like it's like going from like tutorial island to like feeder blood,
Yeah.
basically is what
How's
it
your
feels
um
like.
how's your like stamina? Are you able to go like a 6 minute bout with a killer, like full throttle the whole time and not really be winded at the end?
Um, I'm like medium right now since I'm still coming off
Medium.
my COVID recovery. I would say I'm medium. I'm not like I can't scramble for like all 6 minutes of a round, but I can like I don't have to take a break in between rounds or anything. So
Yeah, I'd say stamina is the biggest thing that'll separate you from like other people because in my senior year of high school when I was injured a lot in wrestling in high school, but my senior year I was able to wrestle a bit. I got on the mat with like a bunch of really good guys. One of the dudes, I think he took third at state like the year prior, but really good wrestler. I got on the mat and probably lost by like 4 or 6 points or something. He beat me, but I got off the mat and was like breathing normal, and I went hard the whole 6 minutes. So I was in really good shape, and it felt really good to be able to go out and compete my hardest and not have to worry about like
Like gassing
being
out,
winded.
yeah.
Yeah, gassing out and being winded at the end of it. And I don't remember how winded he was, but I just remember like I was very upset that I lost, but the profound memory that stuck with me from that match was like, dude, my conditioning is really good, and I'm thankful for that. That's like important. It's nice to be able to like go out there, give it your all for 6 minutes, and like not be completely
Right.
dead halfway through at the end of it. But then there's also in jiu-jitsu specifically, you got to learn how to like get in rest positions and kind of like think your way out of things. But no, it's good
Yeah,
to hear that
like
you're
I've learned how to do that because I'm like in bad positions so much. I've learned how to like breathe, and I think that's partially why like I can make it through rounds is because I'm pretty good at like the breathing management, even if my stamina isn't there all the way. But
all right. Well,
yeah,
let's make an
that's
ode to not getting brutalized.
yeah, let's reduce taps by 10% this week. That's my outro.
All right, reduce taps by 10%, and hopefully my skin heals up so I can climb 10% better.
Yeah, your fingers need to get all calloused and gross again. And with that, we end this episode now.